Hello and welcome to day one of Feminine Wealth. I am so excited for our next 3 days together. This topic is something that I've have so much passion for, as I know you do as well, which is why you're here. So if you are new to any of my content, I'm Lauren Joyce, founder of The Magnetic Woman, and I help women reclaim their feminine power through pleasure. I have been doing this work for over a decade. I've worked with countless women across the globe. And one thing that we always end up working on, no matter who the women are, where they're from, what they're doing, is our relationship to money, to wealth, to abundance. And over the last decade, through my own journey, through my clients' journeys, we have collectively, like myself and my clients, made millions of dollars from moving from this old, outdated, patriarchal belief system around money and into what I call and have coined feminine wealth. So the original definition of wealth was not about money. It was happiness and prosperity in abundance. But happiness came first. And I know that if you're here, you are a woman who has a mission. Like you want to live this big, epic, bold life. And that's going to require a lot of fucking money. And let's be real. You're the type of woman who you have no problem putting the work in. You've created so much by being driven and hardworking. You've already gone through your hustle period. You've probably burned out at least once in your life. And now you want to create wealth, happiness, and abundance, or happiness and prosperity in abundance. You want to create wealth in every area of your life, but you want to do it from a space of being aligned with the work that you're doing. You want to do it from a space of ease, of spaciousness, of freedom. So the truth of the matter is, money is a tool. That's all it is. It's neutral. It's not good. It's not bad. And depending on your relationship with money, you have a lot of beliefs and a lot of stories about what money is and what money isn't. And I know that this isn't your first rodeo when it comes to the topic of money and money mindset. I know that. And what I've really been sitting with, especially over the last few years, is that so much of what we as women have been told to read and study, even when it comes to money mindset, is like Think and Grow Rich and the Science of Getting Rich, which was written by white Christian men at the turn of the century. And here you are, this magical, witchy, spiritual priestess being whose work is here to help evolve humanity, right? And you've done a lot of money work, you've done a lot of money mindset already. And you know how to regulate your nervous system and you know how that plays into money, but yet you've plateaued or are plateauing, you've had dips, you've had contractions, you are on the path of the feminine, and yet you're still trying to keep money off of that path. And what I mean by that is you're not allowing money to be integrated into how you're living in a more feminine way, how you're living rooted in your witchy, priestessy, sacred feminine. And I have a feeling that a big part of the work that you're here to do is spiritual. It is witchy. It is about the divine and sacred feminine. And while you might not be like marketing that, that might not be, you might not be outwardly facing with your marketing around being a witch or a priestess, or maybe you are. That's how you're living your life, right? you have your sacred practices, you have your rituals, and you know that the path of the feminine is about the reclamation and the deepening, right? It is about reclaiming all of these parts of who we are as a woman, as humans, and it's about deepening into who we are, right? So, like, literally everything we've been taught, probably if you're on the path of the feminine up until a few years ago, has been about and for or centering men, right? And so again, when we think back to these books we were all told to read, Think and Grow Rich and the Science of Getting Rich, and now, money mindset work is amazing and necessary and required. And again, you've probably done a lot of it. But the truth of the matter is, if you're a woman who has deconstructed religion and or you just resonate more with the sacred feminine, it can be kind of challenging to like square the circle of prosperity gospel and Christianity, like that Christian spin that tends to come in with a lot of old school money mindset, right? And so, how do we uncouple the patriarchal belief systems, the internalized patriarchy and misogyny from the original definition of wealth, happiness and prosperity and abundance? Because you're not going to be satisfied with just having a lot of money but not doing your soul's work. You're not going to be satisfied with having a lot of money that requires you to work 100 hours a week. You're not going to be satisfied with having a lot of money but being in a relationship where you feel dead and alone. You're not going to be satisfied with having a lot of money and not being able to have the freedom to do what you want to do in the world. Money is an energy, right? And money is a currency, and currency is an energy. So when we can lean back into some of the foundations of the money mindset work, money being an energy, money being a neutral energy, money being a tool, and begin to look at the feminine wounds that are actively triggered right now in the majority of women, and especially spiritual women, and learn to transcend them, to alchemize them, we get to step into, again, what I call feminine wealth, which is going to look different for everybody, but chances are it's going to be an overflow of money that allows you to be your fullest expression in every area of your life. It's going to be receiving money from doing your soul's work, from having an impact in the world, from being of service, but being of service from a place of overflow. Feminine wealth is having time and space to do your morning rituals and practices, to do full moon and new moon rituals, to be in community, to be in sisterhood, to buy those herbs for that next spell you want to cast. Feminine wealth is about being emotionally regulated and having the tools, processes, and rituals to continually come back into the seat of your power. And again, that's going to look different for everybody. How your outward expression of feminine wealth is going to look different for everyone. Okay. Mine definitely has the luxury and travel and like sensual food, clothing vibe. Yours might not, and that's okay. Feminine wealth, again, is just you having the financial overflow to be the fullest expression of yourself and receiving that financial overflow from having an impact in the world, from doing your soul's work. So today we're going to kind of talk about a lot of history, actually, like how have we gotten to the point where we are now, where so many spiritual, intuitive, like light workers are really still in this broke healer identity and mentality. And then tomorrow, we're going to do a deep dive into the 7 core wounds of the feminine. And then on Saturday, day 3, we're going to go deep into ritual to begin to transcend these feminine wounds or the witch wounds. Okay. So many of us are the first women in our entire lineage who have the financial, educational, location, and professional, and even relationship freedom and sovereignty. Now, when I'm recording this, which is the end of September 2024, it is important to also note that, especially here in the United States, our rights as women are under attack. Our bodily autonomy, our reproductive rights, our voting rights are under attack. And this is happening because the feminine is not just rising, the feminine has risen and the patriarchy is freaking out. So let's rewind the tape to somewhere between 3,500 to 5,000 years ago. Okay. So prior to that, and we could, be very conservative and say 5,000 years ago, prior to 5,000 years ago, every culture, every society, every group of people worshipped the goddess, worshipped a female deity. Period. Full fucking stop. Because humans were spiritual. I think spirituality is natural. Religion is created, spirituality is natural, naturally occurring. A connection to the divine, a connection to the oneness in all of us, a connection to energy, however you want to define spirituality, that is different than religion. Okay. So humans, prior to 5,000 years ago, from like the beginning of humanity to 5,000 years ago, humans worshipped the goddess. Period. Because humans looked around and thought something more than me created everything. And who creates life in every species? Women, the female. The female version of the species is the one that brings life into the world. Human women are the ones that birth life. So prior to 5,000 years ago, and this is where we're going from like 3,500 to 5,000 years ago, that included, archaeologists, anything that they would dig up that was like quote unquote a deity was the female body. It was a vulva, so the opening to the vaginal canal. It was a woman. It was a woman with many breasts, right? Because humans were like, if anything created this, it had to be female because females are the ones that bring life into the world. And they believed that not only was the divine a woman, but that women were sacred, that we were the portal between humanity and the divine. Women were revered, aging women were revered, right? So then we move into like 5,000 to 2,000 years ago, this period where things begin to shift from matriarchal and revering the goddess to more of a patriarchal societal structure, and many cultures becoming polytheistic, meaning they worshipped many gods and goddesses. So the goddess was still ever present, right? So we went from just the goddess to gods and goddesses, right? From 5,000 to 2,000 years ago. The reason why humanity shifted to more of a patriarchal structure is not because it's natural, inherent, or innate. It is because men with their tiny little egos didn't like feeling less than, and because they were physically larger, started to use violence, weaponize their larger stature to control women, because they decided that now that we're settling in lands and agriculture is becoming much more of a centerpiece in human society, I need to know what's mine, including which one of these women is mine and which one of these children is mine. Patriarchal is a created system, it's a hierarchical system of power that puts men and the masculine at the top, women and the feminine as less than. So then what you begin to see is religions begin to use spiritual beliefs as a way to back up this idea that men are superior. Okay. So through like Greek, and it wasn't all societies. This is the other thing to understand. So many of us come from a Western European background and or live or come from countries that were colonized by Western Europe. So much of our historical perspective and worldview is very Western European centric, right? And quite frankly, that is where the majority of my background knowledge and, study has been, because that's been my own ancestral lineage, right? So not all cultures and societies were this way, but because the majority of us are from Western European backgrounds and or were colonized by Western European countries, I think that it's important to look at the history of Western Europe, right? So we're talking like Greek and Romans. So the Greeks become a very patriarchal culture. So what becomes one of the largest commodities to be bought and sold within Greek and Roman society? It's not slaves, it's women. Women were seen as property. A few years ago, was in Rome and I was touring the Colosseum. And there's 5 levels of the Colosseum, like, seating. And the tour guide said, okay, on level 1 was always the emperor and like his court. Then level 2 would have been like the wealthy elite class. Level 3 was like the peasants. Level 4 was the slaves. And at the top were women, because the Roman society wanted the slaves to know that even they were better than women. Women were the lowest of the low. They were seen as property to be bought and sold. Their sole purpose was to give birth. That's it. Now, what's important to understand, at the same time in Greek and Roman societies, there was still the worship of the goddesses. There were priestesses in Greek society. The oracle at Delphi, who was seen to be the wisest seer and oracle in all the land, was a woman, right? So the patriarchy is oppressing women and still allowing the divine feminine to hang around, right? And then fast forward to about from like year 0 to about 300, okay, in the Roman Empire. So obviously Jesus is born, he is seen as a Messiah. Then all of his followers, his original followers who were Jewish, begin to spread his spiritual teachings. And at the center of Jesus's spiritual teachings was that everybody is equal, which was in direct conflict and contradiction to Roman society, which was that the emperor was essentially a god, and it was this hierarchy of power and wealth. So the first couple hundred years of Christianity, the people that flocked to it were women and the lower classes, slaves. So a huge portion of Roman society, who Romans were very spiritual. They were constantly going to the temples of the gods and goddesses, constantly giving offerings. So they were already very spiritual people. Massive amounts of lower class slaves and women begin to flock to these new spiritual teachings stating that everybody is equal. Now, the emperor, terrified of losing power, terrified of a revolution, decides to make Christianity the religion of the Roman Empire. And what does he do? He gathers a bunch of men to choose the books that go into the Bible and to choose how Christianity is practiced. Now, why would he do that? Because it became a form of control. So what did they do? They cherry picked the spiritual teachings and the books, how it was going to be practiced, to continue to support the patriarchal culture and society that was already Roman society. So Christianity was just created, basically usurping these spiritual teachings and modifying them to maintain power and control for a small, wealthy group of men. Okay. So then we begin to move forward. And my Roman Empire, as they say, is the fact that the Roman Empire never fell. It just became the church. Yes, it became the Catholic Church, and then like other Christian denominations, Protestants, like Methodists, whatever, they spun off of Catholicism, right? And so for the next 2,000 years, religion and society, religion and the monarchs of these countries, or religion and the leaders of the principalities, the states, the countries, were linked. So the majority of Western European society, culture, rules, laws are either deeply entrenched or deeply influenced by Catholicism / Christianity, this patriarchal concoction of religion. Now, if you are religious, if you are Catholic or Christian, this is not a knock or a critique, but I do think that as women who want to be creating feminine wealth, it is vital that you begin to look at the history of Christianity, like from an unbiased perspective. This is not a knock at your faith. This is not a criticism of your beliefs, right? This is, you need to look at the Christian and Catholic Church as the power structure that it is, right? Okay, so throughout the next 2,000 years, we have Christianity, Catholicism at the center of leadership, of the monarchies, right? Because all of the monarchies in Western Europe were like, I was chosen by all of these kings, were like, I was chosen by God. And therefore, you have to follow what I say because I'm this channel for the divine. So when Christianity takes over in the Roman Empire, Roman society goes from being polytheistic, meaning worshiping gods and goddesses, to there being one male god, right? Then we get all this bullshit in the Bible of like Eve being responsible for the fall of man, like this idea that women are not spiritual leaders, when in fact, for the majority of human history, only women have been spiritual leaders, because we as women are the gateway between humanity and the divine, that we have this unique ability to connect to the divine that men do not have. It's like everything the patriarchy tells us about men is just a projection. It's like, it's actually the truth about women. Men are the weaker sex. Like, think about childbirth. Have you ever seen these videos of like the sensors being placed on men to mimic period pain and childbirth? Like, they can't even function. women make better leaders. It's been proven again and again historically. Women do better with money. We're actually better with money. Women are better spiritual leaders, right? So throughout the last 2,000, 5,000 years, women were bought and sold via marriage. We were seen as property. We were not allowed to own or have our own property. We were told that we're not leaders, that we're not spiritual leaders. Through a large portion of European history, women were not allowed to be educated, because unless it was education about Catholicism or Christianity, because the whole point was just to get married and have kids. Definitely weren't allowed to have their own money, which is why so many of us are drawn to women who have defied patriarchal norms, like the courtesans, who at a time when women were not allowed to read or write or have their own money, they were highly educated and wealthy women in their own right. It's why we're fascinated by women like Cleopatra, right? In the midst of the Roman Empire was this in highly intelligent, like skilled woman navigating this empire and like the power plays in Rome, right? So we're drawn to these women who defy the patriarchy. Now, so for the last 2,000 years, we've been excluded and oppressed around money, right? It wasn't even until 50 years ago here in the United States that we as women could have our own bank accounts without a male signature on it, whether that be our fathers, our husbands, our brothers. So for many of us, we are either the first or second generation of women. Like, I am the first woman in my family born into a world where I could have my own bank account with just my name on it. It wasn't until the 1980s here in the United States that we as women were allowed to take out our own business loan. So when we see, right, the huge impact that patriarchal religion had on the rules and laws, culture, and society, how women were not only cast out but oppressed and used in a way as property to be bought and sold, it's no wonder that we have a lot of baggage, stories, trauma, ancestral wounding around money as women. And here's the thing that most people, actually, quite frankly, I've never seen anybody else talk about this. From around the 1300s through the 1800s, so roughly a 500-year period, we have the witch trials, the witch hunts, the Inquisition. So what happens is these men with their little fragile egos begin to become terrified of the healers, the midwives, the women who live on the outskirts of town, the widows who, in parts, especially of France, female widows, or that's what widow is, widows would gather and basically create like a commune of, they would all have their own little houses and they would garden and like eat together, and they owned their own property, and like creating these communities of like sovereign women. They were already married, their husbands had died, they didn't want to remarry. And so what was happening was actually a lot of freedom. The word spinster actually comes from and denotes this idea of a spinner, a woman who was so good on like the loom, is that what it's called? The wheel, like making yarn and rugs and fabric, that she was so highly paid and financially sovereign. Sovereign meaning power in and of herself, like she wasn't dependent on anybody else. So we see this like rise of female sovereignty, freedom. You have healers, female healers and midwives who are being sought out over like quote unquote male doctors, or like the science at the time, which would be like to drink mercury. And these women are like, oh, instead use this like oregano oil. And what would happen is like the oregano oil would work. And so what were these women started to be called? witches, right? This idea that like a witch has a cat. And so in parts of Europe, they would like if it was a single woman with a cat, they would kill the cats. And what happens when you start to get rid of the cats? You have a rise in vermin, rats. And what were the rats carrying? The fleas that brought the plague. So they're killing these cats, right? Because they're like, that's the sign of a witch. Then there's a rise in plague numbers because the cats aren't killing the rats. And so then who do they blame for the plague? The quote unquote witches. So witches just became this like catch all term for a woman that went against patriarchal standards and norms, that went against the church. And for these hundreds of years, and the numbers vary depending on where you look, basically what the witch trials were, and the Inquisition to a degree, was a femicide. It was a mass killing and extermination of women, but specifically women who went against the patriarchy. What we have to understand, again, because the majority of us come from Western European ancestry and or from countries that were colonized by Western Europe, the witch mania went across the globe, right? Anywhere that Christianity was spread, they're accusing mainly women. Of course, there were men who were also accused, but mainly women who would not fall in line of being a witch. And we all know they were tortured, right? And then it was like, okay, we're going to throw her in a lake with rocks tied to her, and if she sinks, then she's not a witch, but if she somehow escapes that and floats, she's a witch and has to die, right? So often the torture was so awful and egregious, these women would just admit to being witches for it to be over and then would be killed, right? This is also where we're going to see a huge increase in the sisterhood wound, because what's happening is, of course, women want to save their own lives. So they're accusing other women, their friends, their family members of being witches, because it's like, if everybody's against them and I was the one to accuse them, nobody's going to come after me, right? And so for these couple hundred years, this mass femicide, and then there are still countries today, 2024, where women are being killed for being quote unquote witches. But what also happened, right, was this mass extermination of healers, midwives, wise women, women who were like spiritually and intuitively, psychically gifted, women who were sovereign in themselves financially, sexually. So when you think about your own lineage, your own ancestry, you have ancestors who were either killed for being witches or stayed alive because they fell even deeper in line with the patriarchy. So the term, the witch wound, right, is this wounding that my opinion is that all women carry the witch wounds. I've renamed them to be the wounds of the feminine, and I have 7 specific wounds that I have seen again and again and again over the last decade of this work. So the witch wound, right, is this wound, this fear of being a witch, essentially, right? But here's the thing. For us as women who are spiritual, who are witchy, who are priestesses, who are ready to bring our work and movement forward from the feminine, which again would have gotten us killed a couple hundred years ago, these wounds are deeply tied to our ability to make, receive, hold, and circulate money in the world. Because we are currently wanting to do work in the world that would have gotten us killed a couple hundred years ago. And consciously, we know we're not going to be burned at the stake for talking about sexuality online. Ourselves carrying these feminine wounds, not so sure. Our nervous system that has inherited these feminine wounds, not so sure. So in order to create feminine wealth, which again is you having an overflow of happiness and prosperity in abundance so that you can be your fullest expression by doing your soul's work in the world. We have to address these 7 wounds. We have to. And that to me is why I'm seeing so many women right now over the last few years. Now, I think we can just call a spade, right? Like 2020 was this catalyst year, right? The pandemic happened, the world shut down, and we have been exponentially increasing consciously, right? All you have to do is go on TikTok and see massive amounts of women reclaiming their witchy side, reclaiming their priestess side, leaving relationships that are no longer serving them, right? To me, creating feminine wealth is also deeply tied to what I see and what I'm calling the relationship revolution, which is the massive amount of heterosexual relationships that are ending because the women are like, I'm not doing this anymore. I will not settle anymore. I will not tolerate being the domestic, emotional, invisible laborer. I will not tolerate not being met. I will not tolerate being gaslit and low key emotionally abused. Like, I won't tolerate it anymore. And this is why the patriarchy is freaking out. This is why we're seeing so much pushback, a lot trying to come through laws, a lot coming through seeing in some ways a rise of violence against women because women are leaving relationships so that men who are misogynistic, which I believe most men are, who are used to using their partner as their emotional punching bag, their emotional dumping ground, getting all of their domestic and emotional labor done by them. When these women are leaving relationships, these men have nowhere to take it. So it's coming out, I think, more publicly. But that's like a whole other course, okay? Which is called Relationship Revolution, which I'm launching next year. But anyways, okay. In order for you to do the work that you're meant to do in the world, yes, money mindset's important, journaling's important, nervous system regulation is important, but addressing these deep feminine wounds from this integration of the sacred feminine, so rituals and practices and pleasure, is going to revolutionize your life. Right? So again, over the last 4 years, we've seen this exponential boom in our consciousness, in how we're evolving. And for many of us who really are on the leading edge of this path of the feminine, you've seen a slowing down, you've seen a pause, you've seen a void, you've seen a dark night of the soul, you've seen massive contraction or massive like drying up, as you will, of money and resources, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because what's being called forward is something so much more ancient than reading motherfucking Think and Grow Rich. It's time we put down all white and specifically white Christian men's ideas, perspectives, approaches to anything and everything in our life, and realize that what we are here to create, what you are here to create, the world has never seen before. The patriarchy is terrified of, and quite frankly, no man can walk you through how to navigate what is coming up for you as a woman in the patriarchy, going directly in defiance of it. So, tomorrow we're going to dive in deeply to all 7 of the wounds, but I'm so excited. Okay. So, I am reopening the doors for my wealth temple, which is called Rich Sexy Bitch. It is a 7-week program where we are diving in. Each week is a different wound. Again, we're going to go over the wounds tomorrow, but each week we're diving in so deeply to each one of these wounds. This is about you, again, reclaiming the rich, sexy bitch within, like the parts of you that the patriarchy, that culture, that society, that religion has told you is too much, too loud, too bold, too out there, the things that you're worried that if you do, you'll be seen as crazy or you'll be hurt or you'll be left. It is the reclamation, and it's about bringing the sacred feminine into our relationship with money, wealth, and abundance. It's about bringing the sacred feminine into our relationship with the work that we're doing in the world. And so I'm reopening the doors. We start October 10th. Now, here is the best part. If you're here as part of Feminine Wealth, one, make sure you join the Telegram group because there's a $100 off coupon code in the Telegram group and only in the Telegram group. I'm not saying it here because you need to get into the Telegram group. Being in sisterhood, being in community as you reclaim these parts of yourself, as you step into the fullest expression of yourself, is vital. Okay. So the Wealth Temple, we start October 10th. Now, if you're here and you're watching this, down below is the link. And for the next 24 hours, you can join the Wealth Temple at the lowest price ever. When we go live tomorrow at noon, price goes up. We go live Saturday at noon, price goes up to the early bird pricing. And then on October 5th, you have the normal pricing. Okay, so in the Telegram group, you'll get a $100 off coupon code, which you can use to join the Wealth Temple, or you can use at a later date if you want to use it at a later date. If you join in the next 24 hours, you'll get in at the lowest price possible. And because I've already run this container, but I'm running it live again, that means you get access upon signing up to all of the content we did the last round. So you can start right now to begin to shift your relationship to money, wealth, and abundance from the feminine. And then we're going through 7 weeks. So we'll have 7 modules that we're doing live, that I'm recording live for you this round. And here's the other best part. When you join, you will have lifetime access not only to the content we did before, but this content, but any additional content I ever add to this course. Again, I do not see anyone else talking about this intersection between the wounds of the feminine and what you're experiencing financially, slash not even what you're experiencing financially, but why you keep coming up against resistance to go to the next level, to receive with more ease, to be more magnetic. And the reason why I don't see many women talking about this is because, quite frankly, the majority of women have not addressed these deeper feminine wounds, the witch wounds in themselves in general, because you are on the leading edge. You and I, my love, we're on the leading edge of this. And the reason why nobody else is talking about this is because most people haven't come up to this has not come up into most people's consciousness yet. But remember, I said we're on this exponential growth of our consciousness, and you're going to be seeing more and more and more women realizing that this is actually at the core of what's kind of holding them back from the next level. Because we keep going back to what worked before. But again, what's trying to come through is something so much deeper, so much more ancient. So I really, really hope you'll join me in Rich Sexy Bitch. I'm so excited for this round because, one, since we're starting on October 10th, that means we're going to finish right before Thanksgiving, which means we're going to be doing all of this work on increasing your feminine wealth right before the holidays. And who doesn't want to feel better, more juicy, sexier, and more safe, secure with money, slash be manifesting so much more wealth, ease, abundance, right? And because, like, I know that it can be kind of seductive to be like, oh, well, it's the end of the year, like better luck next year. Like, no, now is your time. Now is your time. And we're going to be doing this around Halloween. So we'll like be bringing in even more of like that sexy witch vibe. I'm so excited. If you have any questions, please, please, please feel free to reach out to me personally. Now, I am putting this recording up on the podcast. So if you're listening on the podcast and you want to make sure that you're able to join us over the next few days, you want to go to the link below, so that you can sign up, and the welcome email will give you the Telegram group, so you can go in and join the Telegram group, and then you'll receive emails reminding you for our call tomorrow at noon and Saturday at noon. Okay, my loves, I'll see you tomorrow when we're diving in to the 7 core feminine wounds.